You're with the Retro Hour podcast, and we're here again with Roger Hector, and we're going to be doing the conclusion to our absolutely amazing interview. You know, Roger's had such a big career. Last time we covered, you know, the coin-ops, the start of video games, the early days, and now we're getting into the consoles and that kind of era with, you know, Electronic Arts, which is a huge company. We've had Trip on the podcast, and we're just wondering, Roger, how you got involved then, and how you started working with Trip Hawkins.
Well, that was, let's see, I wound up, EA was a relatively new company at that time. And so they were, they had gotten started. They had been publishing games. They had their own niche that they were pursuing. And I had heard about them. And when I left Bally, I went and talked to them. And one thing led to another, and they said, "Oh, geez, this would be great." I had an interesting interview with Trip, and I reported to him, and he was very interested in the background that I brought to what they were doing, and I thought, well, this could be very cool. So I got started. I was basically handed or put in charge of the production of all sports, action, and arcade games. So they had other senior executive producers who were doing other categories of games, but those were the categories that were mine. And there already had been a couple of games that had been put in production that hadn't been launched yet in the sports world. And one of those, famous John Madden, was well, it was started by Trip, and he actually brought some really unique and I thought interesting ideas for how to leverage value from these licensed sports celebrities.
I was wondering, did you work closely with Happy Keller at all? Because we've had him on the podcast, and he's you know, mentioned the kind of whole EA Sports era, and you know, that wonderful Madden connection as well.
EA Sports as a brand had not been established yet when I came there. It was all just EA and all these different games. But we put a lot of effort into building a brand around these uniquely designed sports games. Madden was a good example of it, although it kind of started awkward. It was a little weird. It was originally designed to work on the Apple II. And the Apple II was a terrible graphics processor computer. I mean, you couldn't do much with it. And so the original EA game for John Madden, that was it. But I put some efforts into getting it on the Amiga, onto the Commodore 64, which was certainly a much better graphics platform, and then evolving through time, but using the core concept that Trip had, which was he wanted to try and find the value added by the celebrity sports people in the game, build that into the game. And John Madden, turns out, you know, they held meetings with him in the early days and asked him, what should we do here? And he was very openly contributing to make this video game, you know, work the way he would coach it to be. And that really added value. And Trip gets the sort of the initial credit for forcing that as an issue, because a lot of celebrity-based licenses, were just their name was stuck on the package without there being much of a contribution. But anyway, yeah, the EA Sports, the action and arcade games, those were, there were all categories that I went into development. I focused on all of them really, and I had a small team, and we contracted out with third-party development groups, and wound up during the time I was there hiring and bringing staff on board that could actually do a lot of the work ourselves. And all of those things were becoming much more helpful, I think, through time.
And at the time, in the early days of EA and around when you joined, etc., at the time, obviously, games were very much, fantasy-based, action-based, etc. Did you think, Trip was crazy? Like, these are sports games. Obviously, we all know, spoiler alert, it was fantastic in the end. It did really well. But, what was your kind of like feel of that and the community feel of that, to, kind of go down that sports direction and, get PGA involved and Jordan versus Bird, etc.?
Well, one of the things I had learned, is that there are different markets. There are different audiences for different types and styles of games. And originally, in the very beginning, it was a very tiny little market because there just wasn't very much exposure for Pong, for example. But as the various categories of games started to evolve, you could see which ones were being successful. You could see, what were the qualities that were appealing to different versions of audiences, different ages of players, different environments. It's one thing if it's in a bar, it's another thing if you're playing it at home or at a party or, various things like that. So understanding how the expanding market would evolve and projecting into that with products, with games that would appeal to that audience or those audiences, that was part of the job. And so we worked on that.
And do you think your contribution to EA and the sports games, do you think that helped the kind of longevity, the long-term success of EA and EA Sports?
The original, I will say, the original concepts were, started with Nolan.
Okay.
No, not Nolan. Let me say it again. Yeah, Trip. Yeah, with Trip.
Yeah.
And I don't want to take any credit away from anybody. The kinds of things that I could see were what was working and what was doing really well, and I would leave that alone. But finding ways to improve on this or that, maybe it's a distribution problem, maybe it's an audience problem, maybe it's a technology problem. All of these various things were all different categories that had to be looked at. And trying to build a team that could leverage those experiences in an organized sort of way was a big piece of how to improve the category of games. And so EA was still a relatively fresh new company at the time I started there, but it also had issues, and they had to evolve their whole system, and they did.
And they definitely they started that kind of video game franchise style thing as well, when they had some of the games coming out in like album covers originally, and that a commercial look. I was wondering if when you later went on to Disney as well, that background of working with companies and that kind of commercial merchandising and looking at games really helped convince Disney to work with you.
Well, originally when I joined EA, EA was not focused on the bigger markets, in my opinion. They were focused on the personal computer world.
Yeah.
And they also didn't have teams internally being paid to develop these things. They used outside groups that the whole idea of promoting the developers as rock stars was an idea that EA adopted and used. And that's why when you see the album cover style of album covers and that sort of thing,
yeah.
all of the guys that had worked on video games like at Atari, that no one ever heard of the people. They never heard of the people because it was all Atari. And EA, part of the attraction of developers to work on their own was to become stars themselves.
I think you're completely right, because with Atari, we've had a few guests on that have talked about hiding their initials in the game somewhere because Atari wouldn't let them actually display it. And you've got slammed on the box on EA, the developer's name. Yeah.
Well, see, so all of that kind of melded together to distinguish EA, but EA did have to evolve into a greater focus on home consumer cartridge games. And that was a different kind of business, particularly when there was different technology that allowed for different levels of newer levels of graphics and things like that. So we having a really good general overview of where the market was and where it was going and all that kind of stuff was very relevant to educating both EA and ultimately Disney. Now, Disney, you asked me about Disney. I was very excited to be recruited by Disney. I'd been to Disneyland as a little kid. I watched Disney on TV. I'd been, Disney movies and all that kind of stuff. So I was a fan of what they'd done. But more importantly, I was familiar with the sort of scale and scope of their corporate business and their global market. And the global market of Disney is, to this very day, huge. And there's probably more businesses than you've heard of. But anyway, I was very excited to join Disney. And what their perception was that they were becoming old-fashioned and not the only way that Disney had participated in the electronic games world or interactive entertainment world was through licensing, Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck. And there was a whole business internally called licensing that managed the Disney characters in these various applications. But it wasn't game design. That didn't happen. So anyway, I came in to start up a new group that could create the games and also do some supervising of the licensing activities that were being done. There's some funny stories attached to all of that. But I was very excited to go there, and it was a very exciting trip. We started building essentially a producer team inside of Disney Interactive. We originally started as a division of their consumer products group, and eventually all of the, we released successful game products out there that were in new Disney categories. Things like, had never been done before, things like preschool software for moms and dads that have a little child and will sit and play ABCs or 1, 2, 3s with Mickey Mouse on their computer screen and let the child engage. And it's a mother and father and child experience. And that kind of thing, nobody had ever done that, but we did it and it was a hit.
It's interesting because in the first part of our interview, you talked about storyboarding, but you also talked about mascots and having those in video games. And then you moving to, a company with the greatest mascot in the world, Mickey Mouse. So
Exactly.
It's an obvious transition. I was wondering then also about the Mickey Mouse games and producing those independent Disney titles for the Genesis. Were they kind of a bit worried, and did they think, this wasn't an audience that they could hit?
Disney's interest in the license application of their property was very self-defensive. They didn't want someone else to screw up Mickey Mouse or leave a negative impression. So Disney's direction wasn't from an experienced game development person. It was applied by someone who could follow the rules exactly that were printed out. And that idea permeated the whole company, was to protect the reputations and the value of their properties. And that's understandable. That's cool. I didn't have a problem. I didn't have a problem with that. I can say when I got involved in this, one of the license games being developed by Sega, turns out, was a Donald Duck game, and the developers were in-house at Sega, and they were developing this Donald Duck game, and they had created a section of the game where Donald has a club in his hands, and he walks around and he smacks baby seals. And when I saw that, I went, I think there's a problem here. We can't have Donald Duck smacking baby seals, because that was a whole big political disaster to happen. So there was always the potential of finding misuse of the characters by third parties, but that made the third parties, the licensees, kind of nervous about what they were trying to do, because they didn't want to screw up they didn't want to offend Disney. And I brought a little more game development consciousness into it. Mickey's Castle of Illusion was a great game. It was a hit game. It was a lot of fun. No clubbing baby seals, right? I mean, it was all put together properly, and the success of that project reinforced to Disney that they could do this. They didn't have to give all the money away to somebody else. So we built this internal development division that built games, built sort of new category games, built software. We had one of my favorite projects was, it wasn't really a game. It was an educational program called the Animation Studio. And it was all about teaching the Disney style of animation.
I remember that. Was that one where you had different layers of paper in there, and you could flip between the paper? Yeah,
exactly.
That was fantastic.
It was this. Well, and that, I mean, it was a big hit, and it reinforced lessons that were being taught internally at Disney for decades, because Disney had hundreds of employees who were animators, and they had to teach them how to do it the Disney style. And I compressed all of that into a program that did a pretty good job of it. And you learned about techniques of animation, like there's a thing called a double bounce walk, where Mickey walks in a double bounce walk. And how is that done? And you do that with the multiple sheets of paper, essentially layered on top of each other. Although there's no paper, it's all on a screen. And this was all before real computer animation took over, which is what it is now. But it was at that time, that was a sort of a historical introduction.
And I remember it looked stunning as well because, there'd been other computer animation done. Eric Schwartz was one that we'd seen on the Amiga as well. And there were quite a few, but the Disney stuff, when it came out, it just looked fabulous, especially using that program. I remember some of the example files on there were mind-blowing, seeing stuff from the Disney artists on PCs and Amigas and other personal computers at the time.
I enjoyed working at Disney. I met many, many really amazingly talented, creative people there. That's kind of an end career destination for hundreds and hundreds of people that work there and have amazing things to do.
So you mentioned Cast of Illusion starring Mickey Mouse there, which really got me excited. I even turned around when you mentioned the clubbing. I've got that Donald Duck game just up there, which I thought was
the
great.
Clubbing is out of it now.
It's out of it, but on the front of the box, he still has a club in his hand,
there you go.
which is funny. But yeah, Mickey Mouse, Cast of Illusion, huge game. Obviously, you're working at Disney at this point, and they're moving to internal production and development. Sega then start trying to pry you away. What's the story there? How did you get involved in Sega? Because obviously they've noticed you at this point. What happened there?
Well, I had worked with. I had established a relationship with Sega already, but it was also the case, and this is kind of a weird story. It's more of a corporate politics story, but there was a time when the rise of the Disney Software Group became evident and obvious to all of the other divisions of Disney, and like the head of the movie division said, "Geez, these game people are using cameras and scripts, and that's what we do, so they should be under us." Mm-hmm. And the consumer products division says, "Well, they're building consumer products. They should be working for us." And actually, it turned out that all of the various divisions of Disney were fighting to take control of us, of our group. And so I was instructed at one point to, okay, let's finish all our existing projects. Don't start anything new. We've got to figure out how the corporate direction needs to go. But you guys are all fine. You'll still be on the payroll. And that all transpired in that way. We stopped building new products. We sold all of our existing products. And then it was during that time that they couldn't decide what to do next. That's when Sega stepped up and said, "Hey, we got you right now." They had their high-end R&D division called STI, Sega Technical Institute. The gentleman that had started that in Japan, a fellow named Mark Cerny. I had known him from our days working together at Atari way in the past. Yeah. And so Mark had decided to leave Sega, Sega,
Yeah.
And,
We've had him
and
on the podcast, actually. He's a really interesting guy. Yeah.
very interesting guy.
STI. Yeah.
I wound up being offered the job he had, which was running STI. And we passed each other, on his way out, I was walking in. And so, since I knew him, I chatted with him a bit just to find out what's going on. And I got the backstory, which was fine. That's all fine. And so that's how I got connected into it. And Sega was an amazing experience. It was quite unique. It was very highly regarded internally at Sega. We had the sort of the A team of the Sonic group. Hirokazu Yasuhara, Kunitaki Aoki, and the other guy's name. I'll think of it. Anyway, the three guys that were the key contributors to Sonic, and there was many more people that were added and supporting, but those guys, Yuji Naka, see? Naka, Yasuhara, and Aoki, they all were driving the bus, so to speak, creating. I arrived there just before the launch of Sonic 2, and that was already underway. It was already took place. I didn't contribute to that, but I was to be in charge of everything that happened after that. And there was all kinds of drama, all kinds of different things. There's very, very ambitious goals established. One of them was Sonic was so successful on an annualized Christmas product basis that every year at Christmas time, there had to be another Sonic game. So that meant the core team had less than a year to do whatever they were going to do.
It's like a 9-10 months. Yeah.
Yeah. And then they also had the responsibility of building something that had more in it than had been done before. And all of those kinds of challenges sort of, partially fell on my lap to deal with trying to get more out of less time, less calendar time, bigger projects. The team itself was amazing in terms of what they could come up with in terms of ideas. But they came up with so many ideas for Sonic 3 that you couldn't do it in 1 year. You couldn't do it in 2 years. So we wound up having to do some back and forth negotiations on what do we do. And it wasn't just the Sonic team, but other parts of Sega were always trying to contribute ideas, which, you kind of had to deal with a lot of sort of corporate politics, so to speak. But I did enjoy it. It was an amazing experience. Had quite a time and managed to make some very successful things happen too.
Yeah. So it's interesting because obviously you mentioned you came in right at Sonic 2. Sonic at that point taking over the world. You've gone from Mickey Mouse to Sonic the Hedgehog in the 90s, which is huge. And obviously you mentioned there the 1 year, Sonic every year kind of thing. So I'm assuming that's where games such as Sonic Spinball and Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine came in to kind of plug the gap between Sonic 2 and Sonic 3. Before we get on to Sonic 3, I've just got so many questions because obviously you've worked for such big, iconic North American development studios, Atari, EA, etc. What was it like suddenly working for, Sega? Japanese? Was it a completely different culture? Was it tough working between the two cultures, like Sega of America? And
it was a a very new experience for me. Um, I learned a lot about Japan culture. And in fact, at one point, part of my mission was to be able to blend the Americans with the Japanese team members working together.
Okay.
And that really doesn't work very well with the total language difference. So I started a regular weekly Japanese language learning session.
Love that.
for the Americans.
Yeah.
And I also, we focused on the feelings, the connections, the life lessons needed by all of the players involved. So the Japanese and the Americans. We also had several people from Europe. So it wasn't just the United States and Japan; it was also Europe, and we sort of defined this as looking for global understanding and acceptance of Sega games, expanding it to a global market that could be addressing any variety of different marketplaces. And that was part of the definition of STI, the Sega Technical Institute. So, yeah, work was put into that. I learned Japanese.
Yeah.
And I also spent some time in Japan. That I had different experiences than I was familiar with through high-end Japanese corporate culture. Sort of behaved a little differently, but that's okay. It was cool. But Sega overall, I also reported to a very well-adapted Japanese executive. There was challenge associated with blending who's who and understanding what were the the goals and objectives and the techniques of management for different for the Japanese culture versus US. Now, I had Tom Kalinske in an office right next to the building that I was in at STI, and Tom and the other executives at Sega of America. STI was not a division of Sega of America, even though we were located in America. We were our own little world. And so I was able to develop relationships easily within Sega of America. So it was actually generally a very successful and productive experience that required a lot of sort of learning new things.
So I wanted to get onto Sonic 3 before we finish, because obviously it was such a huge, iconic game. It came out in the 1993 holiday season in the end. What was that like, going through all these cultural differences, learning Japanese, trying to make that work between the Americans and the Japanese? Obviously, Sonic 1 and 2 were absolutely huge, blast processing, all that jazz. What was it like? What challenges did you face, and anxieties, I guess, of, being the project manager of Sonic 3 and Sonic and Knuckles?
Sonic and Knuckles. Yeah, we had, there were a number of things that happened that had never happened before that wound up requiring creative responses and figuring it out. I think I don't know if I mentioned the whole Michael Jackson thing, but
we've got it there.
I can tell you that story.
That'd be great. That'd be great to hear your side of that. Yeah.
That started one afternoon. I get a phone call from someone who is telling me that to expect a visit from Michael Jackson at STI. I said, really? And what's that all about? And I got no more information.
All right.
So it turns out Michael Jackson was a real heavy-duty Sonic fan.
Mm.
He bought all the games. He had them all. He played them all. He loved Sonic more than anything else. And he wanted to come to meet the team that did that because he respected that. He wanted to expose himself to the team.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what he wanted. And once I had that explained that way, I said, well, okay, come on down.
Mm-hmm.
So he and his bodyguards and such arrived in the afternoon after work. Yeah, we didn't want to attract any media into that. This was just a private intro thing, and giving a Michael Jackson as a fan the opportunity to meet the team. So he came. I showed him around. He was very soft-spoken, very nice guy. Very, no fancy celebrity characterization at all. But we wound up in our conference room with the Sonic team. And I introduced them. I said, this is Michael Jackson. You've probably heard of him. And this is the Sonic team. And they all joined into their own conversation. And ultimately, one of the guys in the Sonic team said, hey, Michael, why don't you do the music for the next Sonic game? And he thought about it for about 2 seconds and said, okay, I'll do it all. And normally that kind of negotiation would take place between attorneys across a span of weeks, right? Now this is just done. And so Michael agreed to do the music for Sonic 3. And that resulted in him doing an amazing job. The actual soundtrack for Sonic 3 had the Michael Jackson sound to it, but it also sounded appropriate for the Sonic game. So it was about as perfect as I could imagine it to be. And unfortunately, very shortly before the Christmas season launch of the game, there was some bad PR that about Michael Jackson that caused the Sega company to go, oh no, we can't be can't be a part of that, and so it fell on me to get my own in-house music composer, who was really good, but not well known, to actually remove all of the existing music in the Sonic game and replace it. We had to keep him there day and night, passing food under the door. He had this impossible task to accomplish, and he took it on and he did it, and it was great. And so that's the music. It was all done in the last tiny second. The first 6 months were invested in making it all wonderful through Michael Jackson, but it didn't work out. So that's how that happened.
I've got one last question before we're going to talk about your latest project, Adventure Valley. And this was just Sonic and Knuckles. When you first saw the kind of ability to be able to place an old character, a new character into one of the old games and kind of like retroactively have those games and those products, updated. What did you think about it? And how did you kind of approach it when you first saw it?
Originally, I thought it was a really good idea. If you can leverage the popularity and the awareness of a successful intellectual property character, that's cool. Now, what you actually do with it the details of how it comes together and how it works, that still has to work mechanically inside a game. But I always liked Knuckles. I thought he was a cool character myself. I like Tails.
Yeah.
And Tails is very appealing. And giving him the ability to be able to fly was a great idea. Let him perform differently on the screen than Sonic, necessarily. Knuckles as a boxer, as a puncher, I thought he had a good character. He was more limited than Tails. But no, I thought it was okay.
Well, we've covered so much. It's been fantastic for you doing this, Roger, and actually coming on the podcast and sparing your time, which is just amazing. We also love that you're still in the video game industry as well, in a kind of educational aspect as well. So tell all of our listeners about your latest project.
Latest project. This has been going on for the last couple of years. The charitable Singleton Foundation approached me a few years ago and asked if I could help them create an entertaining educational game that would make the world a better place. That's what they wanted. And they we talked about it, and one thing led to another, and I said, yeah, I can do that. And so this has resulted. I put together teams and there were marketing people and a whole organization kind of built around this. But the game is called Venture Valley, and it's free to the world. It costs nothing. There are no ads in it. There's no purchasing upgrades. So it's really a gift from the Singletons to the rest of the world. But what it does, the Singletons wanted it to teach subjects that typically are not taught in school,
right?
That are still valuable. And the two they wanted featured were entrepreneurism and financial literacy. You go, wow, that sounds like fun. How do you make that fun? Well, that was the challenge. And so what wound up coming together, it was a kind of a challenge, but I put together teams. I created the core concept. There is a game that works on PCs and cell phones, and like I say, it's free, and you can play against multiple opponents simultaneously, competing against each other's starting a business. So you get to start a business, and there are many businesses, and some of them are funny, some of them are kind of wacky. Others you still have to learn and understand the principles of profit. What's the difference between net profit and gross profit? Well, most high school and college students don't even really know if you ask them that question. And so there's a whole series of lessons to be learned in the game that will allow you to be successful competing against your opponents. And there's another piece of this that became a key part of it, is that the whole esports world has been exploding over the last few years. And esports, turns out, can be sponsored through esports styles, can be sponsored by universities or corporations. And these sponsored tournament events are being held, have been held now out in the world with, you can win $10,000 prize by beating the opponents in an esports style event of playing Venture Valley.
Wow.
And that has been amazing. It's just in the last year. The game itself has won a series of awards.
I'm looking at the site at the moment, and you've just got tons of awards on the site.
Yeah,
and
they're
all really huge as well. It looks like it's fantastic as well, when available for everyone just to get on the App Store or whichever system you're using, on Steam as well.
Well, and it's been expanding beyond just the United States market, because one of the last things I did there before stepping back was close a deal with the country of Poland, who wanted to have Venture Valley as a part of their curriculum in all their public schools. Great. So anyway, having an impact on society is something that's going on. Now, having said all of that, it's still a game. It still looks and feels like a game. It plays like a game. You can get frustrated and lose, or you can get aggressive and win. But right now, I'm kind of looking forward into the world of AI.
Yeah.
And seeing some of the capabilities of AI to add even more value to that kind of project is very, very substantial.
I think you've added a lot to the world of gaming, and you've definitely made it a lot more exciting for us. And it's great to see that you're adding to the world of education as well. Thank you so much, Roger. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Not a problem. It's a pleasure.